Welcome to Module 3 of the Fish and People DVD Education Resource. Each module is supported by a lesson plan that can be found on this DVD disc. Just quit the DVD player and access your computer's file system. You are welcome to use and distribute these resources for non-commercial educational purposes. In the last module, we learned about how marine organisms reproduce and how their tiny planktonic larvae disperse around the oceans. We saw nature's strategies for coping with changes and threats in the environment, and how humans are now breaking the natural cycles of replenishment that support marine species. In this module, we will explore some basic principles of biology and ecology to understand why some species respond differently to fishing pressures than others. In ecological science, all the individuals in a species are referred to as a population. Obviously, the number of adults in that population affects the number of eggs produced to make juveniles for the next generation of that population. But there are also other factors at play. All animals must spend time growing before they become mature adults that can produce eggs. The important thing to understand is for some species, this takes much longer than for others. For example, sardines and squid grow very fast and become mature when they are only a few months old, and many of them die before they reach 1 year of age. In contrast, most turtles need 20 years to mature and can live for over 60 years. While dugongs mature between 8 and 18 years and live for about 50 years. You could say that sardines and squid grow like weeds almost in front of your eyes. But turtles and dugong are like trees. They need a human lifetime to get the same job done. From this graphic, we can see that the management needs of turtles and dugongs are different from sardines and squid. But we can also see important differences in reproductive strategies between the life cycles of fishes as well. For example, sardines grow and reproduce much faster than most other reef fish. But again, the take-home message is pretty clear. If you capture a species before it is big enough to reproduce, you will break its life cycle.
Why is it important that we need to know about growth rate and lifespan in the kind of fish that we exploit or we harvest? There are some fish species which grow very quickly and which are able to withstand high levels of fishing pressure, but there are others which grow very slowly, reach maturity very slowly, and they need a longer time to reach maturity before they can start reproducing.
The key message here is, each species must be allowed to reproduce and complete its life cycle. In earlier times, it was harder for fishers to overfish a species, but now the combined pressure of all fishes means almost any species can be overfished. But there is an alternative to just fishing until all the fish are gone. It's called science-based resource management. By understanding the biology of a species, it is possible to make simple rules for fishers to follow that guarantee the survival and ongoing availability of much-needed food resources. Let's use the trochus shell as an example. Trochus do not mature until they reach about 6 centimetres across the base, which is about when they are 2 years old. If we collect all the trochus before they have a chance to reproduce, we break the species' life cycle and crash the fishery that exploits them. But if we set a minimum size limit of 8 centimetres before fishes are allowed to take them, then each year some trochus will have a chance to actually reproduce before they are removed by fishing. When a large enough spawning population of adult trochus builds up, then more young trochus show up each successive year. As a resource management strategy, size limits need to be determined by a scientific understanding of the biology of the target species. If the minimum size limit is set too low, or if people break the size limit rule, then the wheels fall off the life cycle.
So fishing is one important thing that helping me follow your village. So I think good way now, you follow fishing must do sizing of the fish. Me looking at one very important because one for fisher observe before or here before, him taking fish in 6 inches above, but not less than 6 inches down. Me looking this for time, but you looking at the market honia logis, small thing but orcheta, salim. Should be well put him strong. Recommend for low market small fish. Me find him. Or the small one, not taking that small one.
The key message here is minimum size limits allow species to live long enough to reproduce. Fecundity is the scientific term for the number of eggs an animal can produce. A highly fecund species produces a large number of eggs. This grouper is an example of an animal that can produce hundreds of thousands of eggs per individual. By contrast, a female dugong gives birth to only one baby every 2 to 3 years. They have a low fecundity. Fish can have either high or low fecundity. For example, sharks have low fecundity. They give birth to only a small number of well-developed babies each year. By fish standards, sardines produce a medium number of eggs, in the thousands. But because there may be hundreds of thousands of adults, which may spawn more than once a year, the population of the species overall is highly fecund. That is why they can produce great schools, often in their millions, each year. Sardines are food for almost any fish predator fast enough to catch them. For sardines, the survival equation requires millions of sardines to ensure there is another generation. The number of offspring produced by a species has been determined over evolutionary time to cope with the risks they face in surviving to adulthood. Sharks have evolved having few predators. In a natural situation, their life history strategy of producing a small number of large, well-developed babies is enough to survive in the lottery of life. With a reproductive strategy like this, though, even low levels of fishing pressure can cause shark populations to collapse quickly. A separate point to understand about fecundity is that for many species it changes over time. As an individual grows older and larger, they also become more fecund. For example, a 12 centimetre diameter trochus produces more than 7 times as many eggs as a 7 centimetre trochus. It's the same for fish species like groupers. Scientific studies show that a 39 centimetre female can produce 5 times as many eggs as a 30 centimetre female. Typically, older, larger specimens are better spawners, and therefore are better left in the ocean to make more fish. This important piece of information gives us another management tool to help us make more fish. Earlier, we mentioned minimum size limits as a way of ensuring that enough individuals in a population get large enough to spawn. But we just learnt that for some species, it is the largest animals in the population that produce most of the eggs. In this situation, A maximum size limit is also a good way of making more fish. At a glance, it might seem that size limits lock the fish away from the fishes, but this is not true. Size limits make sure that more fish spawn more often, guaranteeing that there will be more babies in following years. Protecting the biggest fish from capture by fishers guarantees more eggs are released each year. With this kind of protection, fish populations can recover from overfishing. The secret to providing fishers and communities with a better living is not just to be good at fishing, but to be better, more responsible fishers, by understanding and respecting the species we are exploiting. And the best way to do this is to let more fish get older and produce more baby fish over a longer lifespan. So we have now learned that species of animals form visible populations made up of juveniles, subadults, and adults. We've also learned that species differ in their reproductive richness, a concept known as fecundity, and how a species may have a reproductive strategy that makes it naturally common or rare, and why each species will respond differently to fishing pressure.
So suppose you may not respect him, or the resources below me, fishing below me. But if you some below me, I'm at risk now. Me no, I'm not looking. So I think that age group is important. If they can get that message. Overharvesting of the sea fishery,
Here are some key messages. The key factors that influence how a population replenishes itself are how old an individual must be before it produces eggs, the number of eggs it produces and at what size, how often it spawns, how fast it grows, and how long it lives. In the next module, we will learn about the dispersal of larvae in more detail.
But also, main challenge for you is if you work together, then everything fine, okay for you.